Ever had that one little detail that's ruining an otherwise perfect image? Removing unwanted objects using Photoshop. Today on DesignLab. My name is Daniel and welcome to DesignLab. DesignLab is all about using different tools to help you achieve your creative vision. Whether you're a Creative Cloud Pro or a digital design beginner, I'm going to help you develop the skills you need to be a digital design expert. Have you ever taken the perfect photo only to realize there's a person or an object out of place? Whether it's someone walking in the background or a car driving by, there are a number of distractions that can ruin your image composition. Today I'm going to be showing you 3 different methods to remove unwanted objects from photos. While each method focuses on removing unwanted objects, certain methods will be more useful in specific situations. I will be demonstrating these skills step by step using Photoshop. I recommend you follow along with me as we complete today's project. You may also pause the video to keep up with the demonstration. Okay, let's load up Photoshop and dive in. Before jumping in, just a quick reminder to like and subscribe. We publish new videos each week that teach design, development, and cloud productivity skills. You can also visit our website for formal courses that will help you become a digital pro at techlearningnetwork.com. So right now, I've already loaded 4 photos into Photoshop. Let's take a look. You'll notice I have my 4 photos that I've just simply opened with Photoshop all across the top. If I click on them, you can see the 4 photos that we're going to be working with today as I teach you how to remove unwanted objects from images. Okay, let's begin. Here we're going to have my first photo. I'm going to start by selecting the magnifying glass tool in the bottom left, right-clicking, and pressing Fit on Screen. By doing this, I'm going to have a better view of my photo, and I'm going to be able to see a lot smaller details I couldn't see when I was zoomed out. To start, I'm going to want to select the object that I want to remove from my photo. For this one, I'm going to remove this gentleman right here. So I'm just going to zoom in on him as much as I can so I can get a good view of him and his surroundings. Now that I'm zoomed in on him, I'm going to go to the top left and select the Lasso Tool. The Lasso Tool is going to allow me to select specific objects in an image and edit them. So I'm going to try to select as closely as I can to our subject without trying to get too much of the background in. Just like that. And this is a pretty good selection. After you make your selection, you might want to remove some areas still. I'm going to show you how to do that. With the Lasso Tool still selected, I'm going to go over here. I'm going to hold Alt, which is going to allow us to remove from our selection. I'm just going to slowly outline the space in between his legs. And I'm going to unclick. So as you can see, by Alt-clicking, you can make a negative selection that will remove from your original selection. So now that I have a pretty good selection of the subject I want to remove, we're going to go ahead and try a technique to remove it. With our subject selected, I'm going to go ahead to the top left, select Edit, Content Aware Fill. You're basically going to see a bunch of settings on the right here that are going to allow you to tweak the sampling of your subject. This will allow you to change the background more, change the color adaptation, such things. But for now, we're just going to hit OK and trust that Photoshop will do a pretty good job. So now you can see our subject is almost completely gone. I'm going to right-click, press Deselect, and it's going to remove our marching ants. Now if I zoom out, press Fit on Screen, now you can see using Photoshop's Content Aware Fill, it removed our subject and instead replaced it with images of the street or of the sidewalk, all of which is barely visible in this area right here. Now if you zoom in, you might notice there's a little bit of a weird area right here, but just for this demonstration, I'm going to leave it like that. So now let's move on to our second image and our second strategy. I'm going to quickly switch tabs over here. For this one, I'm going to want to go to the bottom right, select our layer, and just hit Ctrl-J. By doing this, we created a copy of our original layer. This will allow us to edit it non-destructively, meaning whenever we want, we can go back to our original photo. So I'm going to rename this for organizational purposes to Removal. So with our removal layer selected, we're going to try the same thing we did last time with the Content Aware Fill tool. You'll notice with this photo, there's a lot more close-up details such as lines and shading. So we'll see how this turns out. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing, draw an outline. This time I'll just fill in the leg space. since we already know how to remove it. And now I have a pretty good outline of our subject. So we're going to do the same thing, go to Edit, Content Aware Fill, and press OK. Okay, so now when I deselect our subject, you'll notice since this image had a lot of lines and continuity between those lines, it's a little weird looking. And since this is a smaller image and it's much more zoomed in, you can very obviously see where the subject was removed. So let's just delete that real quick and try a different method. Once again, I'm going to make a copy of our original layer, title it Removal, and hit Enter. So now we're going to try a different strategy called the Clone Stamp tool. Let's see how it works. So I'm going to go over to the left here and find this little tool that looks like a stamp, and I'm going to hit Clone Stamp tool. And you'll see it gives me a brush. This brush can be used for a number of things, but when I click, it gives me this error saying you cannot use the Clone Stamp tool because there's no defined area to clone. That might seem a little confusing at first, but let's dig into that. I want to replace the subject and make sure that the lines match up evenly. But to do that, I'm going to need an area that already has the background that I want. So I'm simply going to set a definition point for a Clone Stamp tool. Let's say right here. So now I could just set an area I want to define it with, and you'll notice I have this sort of opaque image of the background following me around. With this, and I could just click once it's lined up, and just brush over our image, and you'll see the background getting removed. For this though, I only want to do our top half, since the bottom half of the image is a little bit different. You'll notice that the bottom half, which has the white bevel sort of area, has a little bit different of a pattern. So I'm going to want to redo that, just because the Clone Stamp tool isn't always perfect. Sometimes it'll drag out onto a pattern that you don't want in your image. For example, if I continue to drag this below, you'll notice how the pattern starts to look a little weird, the coloring's a little off over here, there's a small part of her that you can still see. So I'm just going to hit Control-Z and undo that. So now I'm going to set a definition point for the bottom half of our image. Once again, I'm going to Alt-click this corner right here, and I'm just going to line it up right over here with this corner. I'm just going to airbrush over this. Don't worry about this edge over here, we'll fix it shortly. So for this edge, I can just take any area over here, click that, line it up, and do the same thing we just line it up, and do the same thing we just did. Now I'm seeing that this line became uneven over here. So I can go over here, define the area, and just click. Same thing. Line it up as best as I can. Click. While there are a few fine details like the line over here or the shading up here, this is good enough for what we're doing today. And don't worry about this area down here, it's a misrender. Once we export our image, it won't be there. So I can go ahead, right click, fit on screen, and just like that, our subject's gone. Let's look at a side-by-side comparison though. If I press this eye right here, I can look at the layer below it, and you'll see this is our photo with our subject, and without it. With, and without. This is one of the more complex tools you can use. So let's go on to the next image and try using it again. So I'm just going to go to the next tab, where we have this image of a gentleman sitting down on the sidewalk. You'll notice that there's another pattern, whether it's the lines in the frame of the window, the bricks down here, or these little sort of shutters for the window. So once again, I'm going to go to our Clone Stamp tool, select that, and you'll see it still has the area defined for my last image. I'm going to find an area that I have a lot of space with, so let's try right over here. Keep in mind there is a slight slant over here. We're going to have to keep that in mind, so we're going to do the same thing we did last time, where we do the bottom half and the top half. So it's going to be a little hard to see, but I'm going to line that up and just sort of airbrush right over him. Doesn't have to be perfect since we're going to redo the bottom half. Okay, now we have the body of our subject removed. Let's work on the legs. I'm going to find a nice area to source again, maybe this line right here. I'm going to line it up as best as I can and just brush right over that. Now for this one, I'm going to split it into 3 parts actually. Let's go ahead and do the feet since there's a little bit different of a pattern on the sidewalk and with the bricks over here. So I'm going to go over and define an area where we have lots of room. And it doesn't have to line up perfectly. I'm just gonna paint right over his feet, just like that. So now all we have is his ankles left. So now let's select a source. Over here, we have lots of room. Try to line it up with our subject as best as we can, and just go right over the ankles. So you'll notice that there are a few lighting and shading issues, all which can be fixed with the burn tool or the sponge tool. For the purpose of this video, we're just going to focus on removing unwanted objects though. So while the pattern here doesn't line up perfectly, it demonstrated what we wanted to learn. So let's go ahead to our last example. Our last example is going to be demonstrating our third and final method. This method is known as the patch tool, one of the easier ones to use. This method is great when you have repetitive backgrounds such as this one. So we're going to go ahead to the left and just find our patch tool. The patch tool is going to be extremely useful for editing out small little details such as facial blemishes or just a small object in the background. So using the patch tool, I can just go ahead and select one of these birds. Now that I have it selected, you'll see the marching ants or the marquee around it. I'm going to hold down on that and just drag it to an area that has a similar background, maybe right here. And when I have an area, I'm just going to let go, and boom, the bird's gone. Now if I deselect just by clicking, you'll notice that the bird that was here 2 seconds ago is no longer here. So if I undo that, there's the bird, and if I go forward, the bird's gone. So let's just go back for now. I'm going to show you some different uses of this tool and sort of the range that you could have with it. Before I try to select one bird, let's see what happens when I select all the birds. Keep in mind I don't need to have fine detail as the background is repetitive. And I'm just going to drag this over to here where the background sort of lines up with the lighting. Let go. And just like that, the birds are gone. You'll notice over here it also seemed to blend the parts of the cloud pretty nicely, so it looks more natural. Okay, now let's try something else using the patch tool. I'm just going to hit Ctrl-Z and undo all of that until I have our birds back. Now I'm going to try moving the birds using the patch tool to a different part of the image. Let's say over here. I can just go ahead and select right over here. Just select a nice area. Keep in mind I want it to fit all of our birds in there. And then I can just drag that over until the birds are in a good place. Let go. And boom. Now we have 2 sets of birds, and one of which is lower. So then I could just remove these birds, dragging that. And sweet, now our birds have moved from the top of the frame to the middle of the frame. Perfect for our image. So those are the 3 techniques that are going to help you remove unwanted objects from images. Let's go over them one more time. For our first image, we use the Content Aware tool to remove the gentleman from the background. For our second image, we tried the Content Aware tool. It didn't quite work, so we used the Clone Stamp tool to line up these lines with the background. For the third image, we reinforced the Clone Stamp tool and removed a person sitting on the sidewalk. And for the fourth image, we learned how to remove objects using the patch tool, but also how to move them to a different part of the photo. I hope you enjoyed working with me today as we removed unwanted objects from photos using Photoshop. Reinforcing these skills will help you see a new perspective when approaching future projects. I'm Daniel for the Tech Learning Network. We'll see you soon for another episode of Design Lab.